Everyone, welcome to our second podcast. And this is an interesting one because, truthfully, I don't know a damn thing about what I'm talking about. Uh, but I've got two of the most knowledgeable people on the face of the earth here, and of course, because we're having a national championship next Monday, and two kind of teams that were unusually thought of at the beginning of the season that they were going to be there. But really, I think that what we want to talk about, and I just spent 2 days on the Hill because we're trying to get an act through Congress, if nothing else, a skinny bill about antitrust. And and as we know, we are in disarray, if not in an existential crisis in college athletics. And the most important thing about athletes, the one thing I do know is, and I used to tell Gene this all the time, I've never been able to get 110,000 people to watch a chemistry lecture, but I certainly could get people in our stadium. And because of the joy that they had, it was so important to our university. So even the potential loss of that kind of spirit of
Yep.
collegiality and community is very critical. So we have with us today two of the most important people in college athletics. Gene Smith was the athletic director at Arizona State, and then obviously was the athletic director at the Ohio State and University, and taught me everything that I know about athletics. And Brian, we all know about you very prominently situated on CBS Sports, but of course you lived the talk.
Yes.
You played, and including at Texas and in the NFL, and both of these gentlemen have very distinct leadership responsibilities that they heralded, and now I think that no one is better to talk about the nature of where we are in college athletics. So I'm excited to be joined by these legendary sports administrators. So I'll just ask both of you, what was the defining moment when you fell in love with athletics? Brian?
Wow. As you can see from these helmets behind me, I started out at UCLA, and who knew I played in the Big Ten, even though it was the Pac-10 back then, and then transferred to Texas. And I would say the defining moment for me, I always, growing up in Lubbock, Texas, we would work at Clifford B. Audrey Jones Stadium, all the Tech football games, selling popcorn and soda pop and all that, and run on the field, get the sweaty wristbands, and then march with the Tech band back to their band hall. Those were profound moments growing up and following the game. But I was always a Longhorn fan, and I'll tell you, if they lost, it ruined my week. And that's when I know that I had a blank check on my heart for the University of Texas, even though I didn't begin my athletic career there. And we can get into all that. It kind of ties into where we are now today in the collegiate landscape. But I would say at a very young age, I had this emotional attachment to college ball. And it was the Texas Longhorns, and once again, it was a bad week if they didn't come out on top. And at that time, as a young kid, it's hard to make sense of those feelings, but there was definitely an emotional attachment.
And that has been with you right to this moment, right? I mean,
It's still there. I'm still yelling at the television. I'm
and
still screaming when I'm on air. They have to calm me down. If you're ever in our studio, I'm yelling at the TV screen because my Longhorns game is not going in the manner in which I'd like. And I must say, my colleagues, whether it's Aaron Taylor in Notre Dame or Adam Zucker in Syracuse, his alma mater, New Heisel in UCLA, we're all screaming because we still have that fandom and that deep connection to our alma maters.
yeah, Gene, Gene is such a calm guy. I literally, I mean, I would
Tell the
have to.
truth. Come on, Gordon. In some of
Oh
those
no,
meetings,
I know.
man, those budgetary meetings, come on.
At one of the Rose Bowls,
Oh,
the Jake the Snake Plumber went into the end zone with 50 with about 1.5 minutes to go, and I had to go to the bathroom and throw up. And then when I came back, they had won. I mean, only Gene would make that happen. What can I say? And taught me everything I know, including to try to be calm. But Gene, I mean, you really have been sort of the leadership role model for college athletics for a long time.
Yeah.
How did you find that love? And then to become an administrator, that's really interesting too.
yeah, I had a crazy career, and like Brian, I early in my life, I fell in love with sports. I went to public school all my life, and in the ninth grade, my dad set me down and told me I was not going to go to John F. Kennedy, which was the public high school, kind of the rite of passage to life, is the way I looked at it. And he said I was going to bust out to Chanel, all boys, all white. There was only three black kids in the school. And I had never played true organized sports before. I was in a community in Cleveland, Ohio, where we didn't have organized sports. And so organized sports became kind of the entity that helped me deal with all the things I was dealing with in the late 60s, right after the civil rights movement was really at its peak. And the relationships that I established in football and basketball and track, and I wrestled for like, 2 minutes. And then I realized that that ain't for me. But it was the relationships that helped me through all the issues that I dealt with. And I fell in love with the locker room. I fell in love with the players and the relationships, and then obviously the sport itself. Like Brian, I really loved football. Played 9 different sports in high school, but loved football.
Yeah.
And it became my passage to provide an opportunity for me to get a degree. And I never thought about going to college. I was going to go to a community college, and so I always was blessed to have football in my life. So everything, Gordon, that we worked together on, we aspired to do in athletics, and frankly in higher education, goes back to that beginning. It's about the relationships. It's about people. It's about education. And I before I went to Chanel High School the summer before, I had to go to middle school. I had to catch up. I had to go to math. I had to go to English. And because all the kids that I was getting ready to compete against in the classroom, they had gone to St. Pius. I had gone to Charles W. Eliot. And so I was woefully behind academically. And so that's why you and I worked so well together, because we believed in what sport could do academically for the young people we served. So that was my world, and I love Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I had a great time at Notre Dame. And Brian, I'm sorry, we had a chance to beat up on Texas a few times, and actually won the national championship against Texas in 1977. So it was a great experience.
One of the things that both of you said, which I think is way undervalued in all these conversations, is the fact that athletics was the front door to your ability to be able to succeed, not only athletically, but in life.
Yes.
And opportunities that have come to you have really come because of the fact that someone opened up the door for you. And I'm not right about that.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
I had so many people that helped me along the path. And I remember, when I first became an athletic director at Eastern Michigan University, and I was, one of two black athletic directors in the country. Charles Harris was the athletic director at Arizona State at the time, Gordon, and he
Right.
he and I were the only two. And I had people like Jim Delaney and others who, when I went to meetings, as Brian will tell you, you always know when somebody doesn't want you there. You just know it. There's a feeling. There's a way about them. But there were people that I gravitated to who were opening, who were great people, and so my mentors from that point in time in 1994, became important in my life. And it was all through sport. It was all
Yeah.
through athletics. And so
Yeah.
I was blessed.
Yeah.
No doubt. I look back on those formative years and playing Pop Warner football and all those coaches. I've never laid eyes on my biological father, unfortunately. And my grandmother raised me and my siblings. My biological mom was never there. So gravitating to sports gave me that sense of community. And it also put me in touch with a litany of coaches. Even if they weren't my position coach, all of them played a important, significant role in my upbringing. Not just teaching me the game, but giving me a window into what it's like to have a father, and being around their sons and playing with them and going in their house, during special times, whether it was holiday or other birthdays or what have you, and having that community. And then, as Gene said, that locker room, man, that was family. And I bet if you query any player, they would all start with, when you ask them what do they miss the excuse me, and they're going to say the locker room, they're going to say the bus rides, they're going to say the plane rides, because
Yeah.
that camaraderie, and there are societal norms that don't play in those areas, but so it's its own little unique ecosystem. But man, the
Yeah.
memories, and I tell the guys all the time on the set, this is the only locker room we have left. This is the only one we have remaining, and a lot of stuff that's said in here may not go in corporate America, but there's something about that sense of brotherhood, and that's what sports brought to me. And again, it gave me a holistic feel of family. And I could go to my teammates' house and eat up all their food, when they let me in. Their pops would pick me up and take me, to the games. Or, my first season of Pop Warner, coach purchased my cleats and my helmet. And I had an old little Hutch helmet that you guys remember with the little suspender thing, thinking, oh, that's all I need. They just laughed at me like, nah, you're going to need something a little bit more protective than that. And so that sense of the village, if you will, I lived it. Where I grew up in the projects, where I played, from Pop Warner to middle school, to high school. Man, that was family, and all those coaches along the way played just a huge role in my upbringing and getting me to where I am now.
Yeah, and this is so fascinating to me because the both of you make the very same point, and something that we don't talk about now is the fact that your athletic doors that open for you built your character. It was
Yes.
all about character, and we don't hear much of that today. And I know both of you were the first people chosen on any team. I mean, I was talking about I was the last. In fact, they refused to choose me. I mean, I, 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 I was left on the sideline to carry the water. But
No, no doubt
so
that.
so so
So,
so
so,
athletic
so
so
Gordon,
athletic.
this is what one of our coaches would say, son. Uh, we would always say, "You play ass back, coach. Can I get in? Boy, get your ass back."
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was
Well,
you.
mine,
That
mine,
was you.
my athletic career formed my character, which was the fact that to get the hell out of there is exactly right. So, with that conversation, you know, I am so struck that we are in a chaotic state of college athletics right now, and I would like to get both of you to give me your take on where we are, your take on this is for a long conversation, but at least we can start talking about what are the solutions. There have to be solutions because we agree that college athletics is as American as anything you can possibly imagine. We have to preserve it, and we have to nurture it. So, how have we gotten to where we are right now? Gene, tell me. You've been in the middle of all of this for such a long time.
Yeah, and Gordon, I look back on our blessed career and I think about, the process to your point of getting to where we are today. And I think we've tried to solve things in a vacuum, try and solve things individually. We passed different pieces of legislation over time that wasn't a holistic view of what we actually needed to do. And we got away from our core principles, around academics, around education. And we're seeing it today. And it's not as
Absolutely.
strong around education and academics as it is. It's about the sport. And I think over the years that we've done injustice to the industry by just dealing with certain issues. I chaired the NIL committee along with Val Ackerman, the Big East commissioner, and we recommended in 21 to the NCAA board of directors who were presidents at that time. And we recommended a large scale of guardrails to put in place. And Jerry Moorhead, the president at Georgia, was with us. And so I was really disappointed, Gordon, when they passed NIL, but not the guardrails. They stripped away all the guardrails. And that was because we're such a litigious society, and the lawyers in the room recommended, and I understood it. You and I have dealt with it all our careers. The lawyers in the room gave advice that the guardrails would be problematic. And, I told Charlie Baker when I first met him and sat next to him in a meeting, I reminded him that, lawyers give us advice, but we should make the business decisions. And I think over time, we've become such a litigious society that lawyers are making business decisions. And
Yeah.
I'm not against them, but I understand their role, but that's become problematic.
Well,
Gene, I would love to know or hear about some of the guardrails that you guys proposed at that time.
yeah, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So we did a unbelievable process. It took us basically almost 2 years, and we had restrictions on what NIL could be
Hmm.
and what it should be. And our premise was to provide the student athlete with the same opportunities that any student had on campus. That was our
Yep.
premise. and
Perfect.
and it was tied to academics, tied to education. And so we had that the NIL had to be with a business entity. It had to be documented and it basically quid pro quo. It had to be quid pro quo and documented
Yes.
and approved by the institution. We didn't have it going all the way to the NCAA, which it would had to be approved by the institution and ran through our compliance offices, ran by institutional legal if necessary, but it had to be true NIL. We restricted marketing and media rights involvements, the companies like Learfield, Playfly, and all those. We restricted them from their engagement. We wanted the student athlete to be able to cut the deal, which is why we required that they go through fiscal training. They needed to make sure every institution needed to have a program around money management. And so we had a list of those type of things. It really wasn't a lot of rules and regulations,
Yeah.
but it was regarding just how you deal with the student athlete around NIL. Now, one of the big things that I thought was important, we had an attestation process where each president at each institution had to attest that their NIL program met the standards that we outlined, and that would go to the NCAA. Nothing else went to the NCAA, just that attestation. And what it did was it put the onus on the institution. And that's the problem we have today in some of these situations is, we have a guy going for a seventh or eighth year of eligibility and the institution's backing him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have guys who are playing in the NBA now applying
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
and
institutions are supporting it. So
I think all of that is sensical. It makes common sense, and I'm with you. And going back, the educational piece, not everyone values it as much as we do. We come from a different generation, and I'm fond of something I mentioned Aaron Taylor a second ago. He always says we're going to be former athletes more than we are current athletes. So
right.
not, majority of us can't live off our stardom. I got some buddies that are leveraging that. They're going to be able to leverage it for the rest of their lives. I'm not one of them. So some of us are going to have to go out and get jobs. And so I get that educational piece. Not everyone does. But I wrote on this about 30 years ago when I returned to get my degree, and even when I was at school before I left for the NFL, and I thought it was an antiquated business model. And I thought the fact that it was growing from a monetary standpoint and the increase in the salaries for the coaches, I proposed at that time that at least set aside a royalty if my jersey is flying off the racks in the bookstore. That's it. You can set that aside. Maybe I tap into it once I graduate. And that's the stipulation. I have to graduate for me to those funds to be released to me that I have earned via my play and my jersey becoming a hot commodity. So I thought that was something that was very common sense and could be adapted immediately and would help these players. I never foresaw us being where we are, where it's purely pay for play. Now, we had NIL back in my day. It was just under here. And I said earlier, how I fell in love with sports, and I started at UCLA because the Southwest Conference at the time, SMU had just gotten the death penalty the year I'm being recruited. And so one of the reasons I didn't immediately go to Texas because everyone was under the microscope, and it was a crazy time here in the state of Texas and the Southwest Conference. So I go out to UCLA. They're hot. They're about to play in their third straight Rose Bowl. So I knew, guys, that at some point it would come to this. I have a distinct memory of being on set and saying to my cohorts there that when these athletes understand the leverage that they wield and they don't show up on one of these given Saturdays, we're all are going to be in a world of hurt. So I thought it behooved the NCAA to give the athletes something, be proactive, and give them something. Not give, they've earned it. And if it's just as you outlined, Gene, give me the ability that the students who are not athletes have. If they come up with an invention, Michael Dale here in Austin, here at the University of Texas, comes up with computers, and he's able to benefit immediately. He doesn't have to wait till his eligibility has exhausted. He can do that right now. If I come up with a concept, a product or something, I should be able to benefit right now. I shouldn't be, my hands shouldn't be tied by all the rules and regulations of the NCAA. So something as simple as that, where I live in the same lane as regular students, that's all. And I want it as an athlete, and for those who came after me, and for the NCAA not to see it in that manner and understand, as you just laid out beautifully. I think everything that you and Val Ackerman proposed, how is that earth-shattering, groundbreaking? That's just common sense. That's some simple guardrails that we can implement, and hopefully everyone would follow.
Well, I think that both of you have made such a powerful point. And Gene, I knew about those proposals. I think all of us were really, really disappointed. I'm a great fan of Charlie Baker's, but the NCAA really just was afraid of any kind of litigation. They had lost. They were, Judge Wilkin was giving them. She had become the commissioner of football, and it was very difficult. But if we would have been smart, if we would have been wise to do exactly what Brian is saying, that if we had treated student athletes as students the same way that we treat band members and a variety of other things, if we'd have had the common sense of common courtesy to to
Yes.
to treat these kids that way, um, we can't cry over spilled milk. We do know that we made a lot of mistakes, and let me just start with myself. I'm the poster child for bad behavior. I mean, I've been a university president for 45 years. I have not been as thoughtful about all these issues as I could. When I came to Ohio State, by that time, there had been a lot of things that were happening. Gene really did a great job of constantly, and this is the one thing I wish that we had in this culture now. He talked about education, education. That was the number one word, and people believed it, and people, setting the tone from the top is so enormously important. So
Gordon, can I stop you right there because something really stands out about being hypocritical, the NCAA being hypocritical. You just mentioned education and how they impress upon the athletes to focus on education. But when you guys were going through Tattoo Gate, which was just ridiculous, and I said so at the time, uh, this was prior to your bowl game. I believe it was the Sugar Bowl. And they told those young men who were bartering things they had earned. And yet the NCAA was heavy handed and wanted to penalize them, but they said we're going to wait until the beginning of the following season. So it wasn't about education. It was always about money. And that right there, that situation proved it. That right there pulled the veil back and just showed you what the NCAA was about. Because if they truly wanted to be penal, they should have sat those kids. They shouldn't have been sat at all, in my estimation. But if you are going to penalize them for bartering their own gear, it should have happened immediately. You should have done it prior to that bowl game, but that bowl game was more important to them than, let's say, education. So they would speak out of both sides of their mouth, if you will.
well, we don't need to spend a lot of time beating up on the
No.
NCAA. They've beaten up on themselves, and I've just spent time on the Hill, and unfortunately, the NCAA is not in any conversation. That's the reality of where we are. So,
Oh.
okay, gentlemen. So now we've identified what we should have done. Tell me how we're going to correct where we are right now. We've got transfer
I don't
portal
have enough
issues,
degrees.
the transfer
Either I don't have a
portal
PhD.
issues. We've got calendar issues. We've got calls for collective bargaining. We've got NBA drafted players trying to play in college sports, and then on top of it, yesterday. At the Supreme Court, we had, a significant case being dealt with in terms of trans athletes, but also there's the whole issue of Title IX, and
Yeah.
there's the issue of the Olympic movement and Olympic sports. So
But let
how are
me
we
jump
gonna?
into Greece. I'm gonna jump into Greece first with this
Okay,
trans issue. No way in hell, if you were a dude that's now a woman, that you should be playing with the women. I'm sorry. It's as easy and simple as that. No, that should not occur. And I don't know why that's so difficult for anyone to say. As far as the calendar, that's easy to fix. I say we go back to the original signing day in February, that standalone, that first week, that first Wednesday in February, push it back then, because we shouldn't have a transfer portal and all this free agency going on while you're involved in your playoff. That just makes no sense. And those teams that are in the playoff, I think that puts them at a detriment because they're trying to focus on keeping a potentially national champion football team focused and go out and recruit others for the upcoming season. It's just dumb to me. And so we can fix the calendar today, and push those things back. Portal, you're after the national title game here Monday. Then it opens up signing day. We're going to go back to just one signing day in February, and that still keeps everyone engaged as they are now. And I transferred. This transferring to 3 and 4 different schools, and I was reading about a guy this morning that may be transferring to his 6th or 7th school. No, that ain't happening under my watch. If I've been commissioner, I don't think it's prudent. I don't think it's smart. I don't think it's good for the young man at all. And I wish, and I don't begrudge anyone getting their money. More power to you, but I wish these athletes and their family members or whoever's advising them would think more long term than short term. Because I just moved back to Austin. I can't tell you how many connections I have here because I played at the University of Texas, and that can help me in many different situations from a business standpoint, personal standpoint, what have you. That's what it's all about. And all these universities, these coaches are knocking on doors and telling these kids and their families it's about family, right? Okay, well, prove it. And we prove it here. And this is not a PSA for the University of Texas, but I can personally tell you I can pick up the phone and I can get some things accomplished. And I know they can at Ohio State because I got a good friend who played for you guys here, and he tells me all the time the things that they're doing there, even with Coach Tressel, who's no longer part of the university. So think more long term than short term if you're an athlete. But there's low hanging fruit that could be fixed today, I believe, Gene.
So, Gene, how are you going to fix it?
No, I don't know how, but the you got to start with planning principles that everyone can rally around. And one of them we talked about is academics.
Exactly.
The reality is the academic reform that happened, and I forgot what year it was, where we came up with the academic rules that are in place today were really good. They're solid
Yeah.
rules. And so I think looking at this holistically, the calendar is one thing. Brian mentioned a couple things in the calendar, but the whole calendar needs to be looked at, not just the signing day or the transfer portal, spring ball, which we're holding on to for some reason, like it's the Holy Grail. And the reality is, it needs to change. Players are in summer school, they're there anyway. So look at a way to make sure that each school can attest when they're going to have spring practice, and you call it something different. And OTAs is official
Yeah.
training is what's being referred to, but no more contact. 15 contact days, period. So if you go May and June and stop it by July 1, there's still 15 contact days. I think looking at the playing calendar, I believe week 0 should be considered.
Yeah.
Moving the playing date up, so into week 0. Football is the one sport where the athletes play the least number of contests of all sports.
Yeah, you think about that.
Yeah.
And so it's not the games, it's practice. So how do you make sure you have in place a process to ensure that practice is monitored and the student athlete is not exhausted in the practice? The other thing is I'm a big proponent of the CFP, and I'm a big proponent of going to 24. I believe going to 16 is a good step, but I'm also a proponent of going to 24, and I'm also a proponent of ending in the first week of January. If you can
Yeah.
end it January 1st, end it January 1st. But I'm a big proponent of providing access, and I'm a proponent of no conference champions, automatic qualifier, just rank them 24 play. So what I've said was looking at the whole calendar. Everything has to fit, but it's based upon academics. And I believe that when we looked at the transfer rules, The planning principle was provide the same opportunity to student athletes that every student has.
Yes.
And you look at all the data, and the data shows that super majority of the students in the general student population transfer after a whole year of school, after the second semester. And and the reality is they only transfer one time,
Yep.
one time. And so, I'm a big proponent of looking at the whole calendar. I'm a big proponent of providing a student athlete a one-time transfer. Um, if you have an exception that may be related to your family or something of that nature, there's a process to go through to get that approved, and all the documentation needs to exist around that. However, one-time transfer, and Gordon, you and I have faced this. So football, along with five other sports, were the only ones that had the one-time transfer rule, meaning if they transferred, they
Yes.
had.
Right.
If you were a swimmer, you go and transfer and be immediately eligible. And it
Yep.
used to drive me nuts all the time. And the reality is, football supports swimming. Why don't I have the same opportunity?
Right. Exactly.
And so there's ways to do it, but you have to have planning principles that are rooted around the academics. And if a student athlete's not on track, I mean, Brian mentioned somebody going 7 times. The reality is that student athlete loses credit hours when they transfer,
Yep.
typically, and sometimes they might have to change their major
Yep.
just to stay eligible.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I'm me, Gordon. I'm kind of passionate about making sure the student athlete is on academic track. And I'll tell you one last thing before we move on to the next question. Um, Fiscal literacy is so important to me. And
Critical.
the May before NIL was approved in July of 21, I had a meeting with the football team, and the whole football team's there, and all the parents are on Zoom. And I was talking about what's coming, NIL, and how they should address it. And Brian, you appreciate this. I asked them how many pay their taxes. Zero,
Hmm.
because they're all dependent on their parents' taxes.
Yeah.
Okay. And I told them, don't worry about the NCAA, worry about the IRS. Because if you do a deal with a pizza company, Donato's Pizza in Columbus, they're going to pay you in gross. So you better hold back at least 40%.
Yeah.
Don't go spend it on gold chains and cars and
Yep.
dogs and all that stuff. So the reality is, otherwise they're going to be calling your mom. And I don't know, my world, I didn't never wanted my mom called about something. I called my dad and he just turn it over to my mom. And all the parents are
Well,
on Zoom like this.
well,
It's education is so important in so many different ways. There's the classroom
Yeah.
that they're going to, but it's also what the athletic department is responsible for around fiscal literacy and other things that exist.
it's also about life, and I
Yeah,
think that's what
Yes.
you're talking about. Yeah. Unfortunately, now some of these kids who've had this NIL money, instead of going into the portal, they're going off to the who's gal. I mean, because
right.
they haven't paid their taxes. It's very unfortunate. So I mean, I'm going to nominate Gene Smith for Commissioner of Athletics nationally, and
I
I and
second that
Brian
nomination.
and Brian, I'm going to make you his co-commissioner there. I mean, because this makes so much sense. But the problem is we're looking through the rearview mirror. We could have done
Yep.
a number of things, and as I say, I blame myself as much, and I say that because I think Gene and I had this great relationship because we talked all the time. He
Right.
was a vice president of the university. He was involved in recruiting and a variety of other things. The separation in so many institutions of athletics being a world unto its own. bringing that back in is going to be terribly important. But financially, it's just not sustainable right now. There's just no doubt
Yeah.
about it. Whether it be you two guys are two of the biggest institutions in the country with the largest athletic budgets, and there's a lot of problems right now with that, and that's what we're trying to determine is how do we develop a financially stable system, given the fact that we lost all these court cases. Um, Schools are going into massive debt. The price for athletics is keep going up. Donors are fatigued. I can tell you that right now.
Yep.
Private equity is coming in. Olympic programs, women's programs are at risk. How do we try to bring some semblance of financial stability back into these programs?
I think this is going to be right for PE if it's done correctly. And I'm having those conversations with some of my business partners and these PE entities because they're underutilized assets. They're on each and every campus that you can tap into and do or make these relationships, these business relationships in a manner that are mutually beneficial for all parties. And so it's not your typical PE situation. I come in, we're going to scour your books and we're going to cut here, here, and here, and a ton of people are going to be out of work. Then we're going to, take this thing down to the studs and then sell it off. No, that's not how it works. But when you look under the hood and you have an understanding of the collegiate business model, which I think you both would agree is totally different than any other entity out in corporate America. There's so many different tentacles. So you have to, number one, understand the landscape, which we are educating our partners of, and two, get in as an institution and understand, hey, I've got some assets here that could be magnified and monetized, if you will. So those conversations are ongoing. You just gotta make sure both parties understand, how this relationship, as far as the PE being involved, materializes, and both parties are getting what they need from the relationship. So that's a longer conversation we could have. I'm having them now, but I think PE is coming. When you look at the big $500 million deal that Utah did, haven't really dove deep into that, been able to distill how that's going to work out down the road. But I'm telling you, you've got some assets on all these campuses, whether it's your ticketing, your payments, what have you, where some meaningful business relationships can be had, and it could assist with where these entities are, these universities are, these programs are currently. Because you're right, Gordon, they are hemorrhaging. I hear it all the time, and now all these other costs are coming online. And where is that money going to come from? Because donors, I hear it from them as well. They're tired. They're tired of digging into
Yeah,
their purses, if
yeah,
you will.
yeah. So, Gene, what do you think, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue, Gordon, as you well know, and I think part of it is we need to help institutions decide where they fit.
Yes.
So, I'm a big proponent that the group of five should have its own playoff system. Um, they should. And I think that there's monetization opportunities there.
Yes.
Um, and I believe that locally on their campuses, that opportunity to be in their own playoffs system will also generate some revenue for some schools who are in the hunt locally. And so, when I was at Eastern Michigan as the athletic director, some of my coaches would come to me and say, well, Michigan State has this, Michigan has this, and we were obviously because we were right in their shadow. And I used to tell them, hey, look, if you want to be at Michigan or Michigan State, go work there. We're Eastern Michigan. We want to be Toledo. We want to be
Yeah.
Bowling Green. And I think so many people aspire to be Ohio State or Texas. And so many, it's unfortunate, so many people in leadership aspire to be that. That is unattainable. So understand, in my view, we need to look at how you split up the 300 37 schools now and help them focus in their lane. I also believe, Gordon, you did this for me, and you did this for our athletic department. You promoted me to vice president. You allowed me to oversee um, uh, the business entities that had an opportunity to generate revenue. Um, we ran all the concerts at the institution,
Yeah.
all of them. I
Yeah.
remember changing the grass to artificial turf because Brian, it was hard for me because I love grass, but
Yeah.
we had an iconic facility sitting there, the shoe, and it was only being used 7 or 8 times a year for
Yep.
football.
Yeah.
And we changed it so we can do concerts, and they're doing like 5 concerts a year now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
making money. And
Yeah.
um, so the other thing is looking at locally exactly what you said, Gordon, about integrating athletics into the institution, and institutions need to make different decisions financially around athletics.
Mm.
It's just going to happen. It's going to happen. PE may come in, or you may create another revenue stream, but the Olympic sports are going to still get killed.
Yeah.
So at Ohio State now and at Texas right now, Chris Del Conte, my good friend, I guarantee you they're going through a process to figure out how do they retain the current players that they want to retain? How do they work in the transfer portal to
Yep.
ensure that they have enough money to do that? And then they're trying to figure out how they make sure NIL is appropriate. So all that's going on, but that means that, you know what? Maybe we got to take, 100K from swimming.
Yep.
Maybe we got to take, 10K from men's
Yeah.
tennis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how those Olympic sports get killed. It's not that, you're going to see schools dropping sports, obviously. We've seen that. But what's really going to happen is they're not going to have the experience that all they've used to have and they should have as a student athlete. So there's a lot there financially, but I do believe that institutions need to think differently about how they fund athletics. And that's a hard call for a president. It really
Yeah.
is a hard
Yeah.
Well,
call.
you
It's
understood
a
and you
revenue.
understand this evolution of
Yeah.
the athletic
Yeah.
department. And we
Yeah.
were saying this back in 2017, 18, 19, that you're no longer that, you know, conventional athletic department. You are now an
Yeah.
entertainment
Right.
entity, and you
Right.
should view it as such.
Yeah. Gordon
Well, one.
allowed us to go down. We had a 19,000 seat arena on our campus, the Schottenstein Center. Gordon allowed us to submit a bid to manage Nationwide Arena downtown, which also had 19,000 seats, and it was a maybe 15, 20 minutes away max, and had the Blue Jackets in it. And Gordon allowed us to bid to manage that facility.
Yeah.
And we
Well.
saved them about 1.2 million in the first
Yeah.
year, but we generated revenue for the
Well, we started being very
Wow.
entrepreneurial. We had to be very
Yeah.
entrepreneurial.
we did a great job.
The difference is the fact that I had an athletic director who was very entrepreneurial and who knew exactly what he was doing. Sometimes I'm not certain I want to put that in. And of course we did some crazy things. We sold parking. We
Oh
started
yeah.
monetizing. We started monetizing everything we possibly could.
Thank
And then
you.
we and then we'd
Yes.
start. Then we'd start. We would put that into the institution, into the athletic department, the student athletes, and so
Mhm.
forth. One thing, and we're getting very close on time, but one thing I'll just say is that I've been working very, very, very diligently on the Hill to see if we can't get an antitrust exemption through. Part of it is to change the Sports Broadcasting Act of
Right.
'61, which would, we in college athletics, we thought this is the craziest damn thing in the world. The NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, they want to pool their resources. Why would we do that? It would denigrate what we're doing. We've got to think about every possible resource, because the fatigue is setting in. And the thing about it is no university, whether it's Ohio State, whether it's Michigan, whether it's West Virginia, whether it's Colorado, no one's going to be able to sustain this pathway where we are. So the final question I'm going to ask you are two things. One is, what role does education play in all of this? In the end, it is an intercollegiate model, and we're trying to preserve that. And then I will pop the question: who's going to win on Monday? Okay, so Gene, tell me,
Yeah,
tell me, where does education play in all of this now?
I think it's huge. I mean, I think leadership in higher education, presidents, and provosts and athletic directors need to stand up and pound their chest around education and academics. Some of these things that are happening, they're not about education. The transfer portal, January 2nd through January 16th, was chosen because football coaches basically wanted to have an opportunity to make sure they had their rosters set.
Yeah,
Well, the reality is, I know it's not happening everywhere. Every school is not this way, but a lot of schools, the athletic director is calling admissions office on January 9th, trying to get somebody in school. And then they put pressure on their academic people to find them classes. And school's been in session for a week.
Yep.
The hell are we doing? And
yeah,
so the reality is, leadership needs to stand up and be proud of the fact that we're higher education and we're about academics, and quit this kowtowing to the media and all the lawyers and everybody, and draw a line in the sand. That's one. Um, and secondly, and this is the hardest. It's not the hardest, but it requires, kind of cutting with a knife the right way on the bread. Um, you got to figure out the governance. Gordon, you know this. We're fractured.
Yep.
well, we didn't spend any time on governance, but that is the big unknown out there. We've got to figure this
Yep.
governance issue out.
We're
Oh,
fractured, and we have different
yeah,
people, different entities trying to provide
yeah,
leadership.
absolutely.
And when you have fractured leadership, there's vacuums, and
Yeah,
everybody
Yes.
tries to fill it. And so you have all these different messages, all these different agendas, and it's flawed. And, I think what you're doing and others are doing on the Hill, trying to get us antitrust protection, is critical, but we got to solve the governance
yeah,
issues.
and
Agreed. All these various legislations that banty about is just making it nuts.
that is the
From an
key.
educational
Yeah,
standpoint, I am a roadmap for doing things wrong. But the one thing I got right was, after the NFL kicked me out, I returned here to the University of Texas and got my degree. And it's the best thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, so I would be front and center promoting the value of education. I had promised my late grandma that I would do it, and unfortunately she wasn't here to see me walk, but I completed that task, and so I think it's super important to get that education. That's going to carry you a lot longer. As I said earlier, quoting AT, you're going to be a
yeah.
former player longer than you are a current player. So I think that's invaluable.
Yeah.
Getting that piece of paper.
And we've never and in all these conversations, gentlemen, the education piece has been lost in the cacophony of everything, and we've got to make that back, because that's what differentiates us.
Yes.
That's what we're about. And I've loved the fact that both of you really started off with education being important to us in terms of athletics, but ending with the fact that it's that way. Okay, who's going to win on Monday?
The Big Ten team.
Yeah, I'm with Indiana. I hope they win, but um, Gordon, did you see those ticket prices?
Yeah, they're just
What
extraordinary.
are they? I haven't seen.
Well,
Oh my God, Ryan,
I
it's
for
crazy.
many
It's a
years I was on the CF.
65,000 seat facility, and
Yeah,
25K to
yeah,
sit in the lower bowl.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's,
yeah. Yeah, well, since leaving the university presidency and since getting off the CFP, I'm going to enjoy watching it right from my thing. But listen, let me tell you something. This has been so wonderful, and I appreciate both of you. And I mean, I really do. Gene has been a real inspiration to me, and I'm grateful for our friendship. And Brian, you and I are great new friends, and so.
Yes.
We've got a lot more to say about this, but this lays the table for what I think are going to be some broader discussions, and hopefully we'll be
I,
able to have more of those. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for.
Thank you guys. I've been outclassed, man. I appreciate
No,
both of you. Y'all are giants in our sport, in our arena, and this has been so cool.
Yeah, all 5'5" and
I agree.
140 pounds of me. I'm a real giant. So
That's
anyway,
how big my breakfast is, Gordon.
yeah, I know. So anyway, everyone have a great day.